Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. We are in a new Torah reading, second Aliyah of the book of Genesis in the Torah portion of Vayigash. And this is with Onkelos' translation on the Torah, his Targum. All right, it is going to be chapter 44, verse 7. Chapter 44, verse 7. I'm sorry. Chapter... Yikes. Oh, I'm sorry. Chapter 44, verse 31 through chapter... through chapter 45, verse 7. Why am I confused? All right. Verse 31, Torah and Onkelos. Onkelos is in the bolded letters. That's his addition to the Torah, his translation. And there are more of Onkelos' reasonings down here on the bottom and other commentary. Verse 31, Torah and Onkelos. I'll begin with verse 30 because it's a full sentence here. Verse 30. Therefore, when I return to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, and his life being as dear to him as his own, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Your servant will bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father in grief to Sheol. Verse 32, Torah. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not return him to you, I will be sinning to my father forever. All right, verse 31. Commentary. With us, neither our Targumist nor the Saadia Gaon have these implied words, but they are in the Septuagint, Samaritan Bible, and the Peshitta translation. Verse 32, pledged himself for the boy. The Aramaic drops the Hebrew et, as in verse 16, and inserts the prefix be, which is for, meaning for. Will be. Onkelos adds will be, which is unnecessary in Scripture's idiom. Verse 33, Torah and Onkelos. Now, let your servant now remain as a slave to my Lord instead of the boy. Let the boy return with his brothers. Verse 34. For how can I return to my father unless the boy is with me, lest I see the disaster that will befall my father? Verse 32. Commentary. Pledged himself for the boy. The Aramaic drops the Hebrew et. Okay, I read that. Verse 34. How can I return? The Saadia Gaon adds, for I think, how can I return? All right. Verse 1, chapter 45. Joseph could no longer control himself before all who stood before him. He cried out, take all the people from my presence. So no person stayed with him when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. Verse 2, he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the people of Pharaoh's household heard it. Verse 1. No longer control. Virtually, all the biblical commentators understand that Joseph was reacting to Judah's passionate plea on behalf of Benjamin. Nachmanides, however, contends that Joseph was moved when he heard how the Egyptians responded to Judah's presentation. Curiously, Nachmanides criticizes Rashi and Ibn Ezra for explaining Scripture's lehit apek, as bear, and states that Onkelos' translation, strengthen himself, is the correct definition. Actually, the Aramaic word also means control oneself, or to bear, as Rashi and Ibn Ezra note. Take all the people. Nachmanides contends that Joseph chased the Egyptians from his room because he was afraid that if they heard how his brothers had brutally treated him, they would see them as treacherous barbarians who should not be allowed to dwell in Egypt. He also feared that the Egyptians would worry that the brothers might try to harm Pharaoh. He was concerned that the Egyptians might also stop trusting him, since he was related to these brothers and presumably shared their nefarious disposition. Verse 2. Egyptians. Whenever the Bible's term Egypt describes the people and not the land, Onkelos substitutes Egyptians. People. The Aramaic typically inserts people before house, when Scripture alludes to humans and not a dwelling. Verse 3. Torah. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still endure? His brothers were unable to answer him anything because they were frightened of him. Verse 4. Joseph said to his brothers, come now close to me. They came close, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Verse 3. Endure. Our Targum sometimes translates the Hebrew root chai, meaning alive, using the Aramaic chai, which also means alive, and at other times with kayam, meaning existence, enduring, or lasting, as he does here and in verses 5, 7, 26, and 28. The latter term denotes physical and mental vigor. Since the brothers had already informed Joseph that their father was alive, he endures, is appropriate here. Endure is appropriate. Likewise, Sepharno explains that Joseph exclaimed, how was it possible for Jacob to endure in view of his worry over and concern for me? Anything. Onkelos inserts anything as a clarification. Verse 4. Torah and Onkelos. Joseph said to his brothers, come now, close to me. They came close. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For the Lord sent me before you to preserve life. Verse 6. It is now 2 years that the famine is in the land. There will still be 5 years in which there will be neither sowing nor harvest. All right, verse 5. Verse 4, commentary. Come now close to me. Rashi, Radak, Pseudo-Jonathan, and Chazkuni quote Genesis Rabbah. When they drew close, Joseph showed them or told them about his circumcision to prove his identity. Verse 5, Lord. In this context, Elohim. Verse 6, sowing. The Targumist converts Scripture's plowing to the more relevant sowing, since the famished people's concern was not whether they could plow, that is, prepare the ground, but whether they could sow seed and harvest it. Verse 7. All right, verse 6. Torah and Onkelos. It is now 2 years that the famine is in the land. There will still be 5 years in which there will be neither sowing nor harvest. The Lord sent me before you so that you could survive on the earth and to preserve you with a great deliverance. All right, and that is the commentary, the translation of Onkelos and additional commentary, and also Onkelos' reasoning behind his translation. Let's set this up here and dig into the daily wisdom on the Parshiot. Wisdom on the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Second Torah reading, what I just read. We are in Parshat Vayigash, the book of Genesis. The second reading is chapter 44, verse 31, through chapter 45, verse 7, what I just read. Judah's display of self-sacrifice for Benjamin convinced Joseph that his brothers had truly repented of their former attitude. He therefore revealed his true identity to them. The brothers were understandably afraid that Joseph would take revenge on them. Joseph, however, assured them that he viewed the entire episode as divine providence and did not bear any personal grudge against them. The title of this daily wisdom on the Parshiot is called Influencing the Whole World. Joseph said to his brothers, God sent me ahead of you. When God arranged for Joseph to rule over Egypt, this included the mandate to positively influence it spiritually as well. Therefore, when, in the following verse, Joseph alluded to his position and ability, he made it clear to his brothers that he was not acting as their emissaries, but as God's. It was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me ruler over all Egypt. Egypt is the archetype of all exiles, and Joseph is the archetype of all Jewish leaders. Thus, the ability to positively influence reality, even during exile, is vested in Joseph's heirs, the spiritual leaders of each generation. When we act as their emissaries, inspired, empowered, and guided by them, we too possess the ability to affect the entire world positively. We do this by encouraging our fellow Jews to embrace the teachings of the Torah, and by encouraging all humanity to embrace the Noahide laws in order to create a world of justice, goodness, and kindness. All right. And I'm also going to read another wisdom on the Torah, what we just read. And this is what we just read in the Onkelos Sefer, Genesis chapter 44, verse 31 through chapter 45, verse 7. All right. Judah's display of self-sacrifice for Benjamin convinced Joseph that his brothers had truly repented of their former attitude. He therefore revealed his true identity to them. The brothers were understandably afraid that Joseph would take revenge on them. Joseph, however, assured them that he viewed the entire episode as divine providence and did not bear any personal grudge against them. The title of this daily wisdom on the Parshiot is called Realizing Divine Providence. Now, do not be distressed or reproach yourselves for having sold me here, since it was in order to provide for your needs that God sent me ahead of you. It was divine providence that Joseph, of all his brothers, was the one who was the first of his family to reach Egypt. Joseph was uniquely suited to prepare the way for the family. He alone possessed the spiritual fortitude to remain true to his ideals, even while rising to become viceroy of the materialistic empire of Egypt. By combining spiritual integrity with administrative acumen, he was able to provide for his family, both spiritually and materially, when they finally arrived. Ultimately, the setting he orchestrated for them is what enabled the family to both survive their subsequent slavery and develop into a people fit to accept God's mission by receiving the Torah. We can all learn from Joseph, recognizing how divine providence has placed us in whatever position of influence we occupy, and realizing that the purpose of this providence is to provide for the needs, spiritual and physical, of those whom the same divine providence has entrusted to our care. All right. And that is the Torah reading with Onkelos on the Torah. Parshas Vayigash, the book of Genesis. Have a wonderful day.